The chapter begins as finally the massive gate began to open, unleashing the creatures sealed within. A torrent of magic beasts poured out, instantly eclipsing the sky. Leading them was a colossal shadow soldier, whose presence alone crushed the air around it. The hunters were left aghast by the overwhelming numbers. Gasps and screams of despair rang throughout the battlefield. One hunter shouted desperately, issuing a command. "Everyone, commence attack." The hunters on the ground immediately prepared to move. But before anyone could take a single step, Jinwoo's voice thundered across the battlefield. Nobody moved. The sheer force of mana behind his command carried his intent to everyone present, even those who didn't understand Korean. The hunters froze in place as if rooted to the ground. Tens of thousands of confused hunters stared at Jinwoo, unable to comprehend why he was stopping them. Chairman Jinshul quickly approached Jinwoo and asked why he had ordered everyone to halt. Jinwoo answered calmly, never taking his eyes off the magic beasts pouring out of the gate. "It's all right, Chairman." The army of magic beasts continued to advance, now fully revealed before them. Hunter Choi Jong-in frowned deeply, wondering what Jinwoo was thinking. Are we really going to face that many demonic beasts without attacking them while they're still in the air? Jinwoo then began walking forward, alone, toward the massive figure leading the army. Soon, Jinwoo stood face to face with the massive beast. Without warning, the enormous magic beast dropped to one knee before him. One after another, the soldiers behind it followed suit, and an absolute silence fell over the battlefield. After a brief pause, the leading figure spoke. Grand Marshal Bellion reporting. "We respectfully greet our liege." The sight of hundreds of thousands of soldiers bowing simultaneously was beyond belief. The hunters held their breaths, staring in disbelief at the scene unfolding before them. Chairman Jinshul muttered in shock, unable to understand what was happening. Nearby, Hunter Thomas Andre turned to Leonard and asked if he was truly seeing this with his own eyes. Leonard replied in stunned disbelief that he was. Even a single one of those magic beasts could threaten humanity, and yet 3 massive dragon-class beasts stood gathered in one place. Jinwoo finally realized the truth. This is the real Shadow Army. This must be what the previous Shadow Monarch, Ashbourne, had left behind for him. Jinwoo swallowed hard as he scanned the countless soldiers. Though he had not personally created them, he could feel a deep connection to each one, like an intricate spiderweb linking them all together. Through it, he sensed their overwhelming joy at being reunited with their master. Jinwoo spoke quietly, yet his words carried immense weight. Now, the real war begins. The scene then shifts as an emergency meeting gets underway in the association's conference room. Chairman Jinshul sits with the executive members as reports flood in. Foreign media outlets were demanding an official explanation of the incident. The American Hunters Bureau was requesting the disclosure of Sung Jinwoo's whereabouts. The city's disaster headquarters wanted to know whether the evacuated civilians could safely return. One member added that the Jimmy Show from the Hunters channel was requesting an interview with Sung Jinwoo. Another member scoffed. "Whoever this Jimmy is, tell them they're free to take him, if they can even get him to show up." Someone else muttered that Sung Jinwoo's summons had appeared far too suddenly. Jinshul shot him a sharp look. "Are you saying the demonic beast should have come out of the colossal gate instead?" The man immediately broke into a cold sweat and stammered that it wasn't what he meant. Jinshul continued sternly. "Instead of interview requests, shouldn't we be receiving calls from the families of deceased hunters? And yet we're standing here, free and alive. Do you even realize what that means?" In his mind, Jinshul replayed the impossible scene. Hundreds of thousands of beasts emerging from the gate, only to be absorbed into Sung Jinwoo's army. Who could have ever imagined this? He spoke again, calmer this time. "I know everyone is confused by Hunter Sung Jinwoo's sudden disappearance. But this isn't the first time he's vanished without a trace. We should be used to it by now. And if even we, the Hunters Association, can't understand the burdens he carries, then who can?" One member apologized, admitting he had spoken out of turn. Jinshul let out a quiet sigh and gazed out the window, wondering what Sung Jinwoo was doing in this very moment. The scene then shifts in a vast, unfamiliar land. Jinwoo stood with Tusk's staff in hand, watching his shadow soldiers engage in a mock battle. The army had been divided into 2 forces for training. Bellion, standing beside him, commented that he had never imagined such a form of military exercise. Jinwoo shrugged. They won't die anyway. Suddenly, Beru rushed over and asked if he could test his qualifications for the Grand Marshal position. Jinwoo blinked in surprise. Qualifications for Grand Marshal? Bellion turned his gaze toward Beru. Beru straightened proudly. As a commander, I challenge Grand Marshal Bellion to a duel. Jinwoo smiled faintly. A battle between commanders, huh? The scene shifted as Bellion and Beru stood facing each other, ready for combat. Jinwoo and the other soldiers watched from afar. Beru let out a piercing screech, signaling the start. Bellion calmly drew his massive sword and raised it before him. As Jinwoo observed, he noted the resemblance to Igris's great sword, though Bellion was far larger. He probably focuses more on power than speed. If that's the case, Beru might have a chance. Beru suddenly dashed forward. Without warning, Bellion's sword stretched unnaturally, moving like a serpent as it shot toward Beru. Jinwoo's eyes widened in shock. Beru barely managed to deflect it and change direction, but Bellion followed up, wielding his sword like a whip. A storm of slashes erupted, the concentrated mana tearing through the land around Beru. In the next instant, Bellion's blade hit into Beru's abdomen. Is it already over? Jinwoo thought in disbelief. Bellion had neutralized Beru's assault in an instant. His reflexes far exceeded Jinwoo's expectations. Each strike carried enough power to devastate the ground beneath him. No wonder he holds the title of Grand Marshal. Still, Jinwoo narrowed his eyes. But the greatest strength of an insect is its tenacity. Suddenly, Beru attacked forward, ramming himself into Bellion's chest. Bellion didn't even flinch. He merely stared down at Beru. The scene then shifts to Hunter Lu Jigang stood surrounded by reporters alongside the hunters who had traveled to support South Korea. One reporter asked, "Many have praised your courageous decision to assist South Korea. However, some believe there was no reason for your involvement. What do you say to them?" Lu Jigang scowled. Who the hell is spouting such bullshit? Do those idiots even have brains or maps? Do they realize which country is directly above South Korea? He continued coldly. If I, Lu Jigang, wasn't confident I could stop whatever came next if Sung Jinwoo failed, then of course I went to help him. And if anyone has a problem with that, they're welcome to face the demonic beasts themselves. Suddenly, everyone froze. Lu Jigang and the reporters slowly lifted their gazes skyward. No way. Above them, a massive gate, identical to the one in South Korea, hung ominously in the sky. Elsewhere in a dark, dungeon-like realm place, two figures conversed in the shadows. One sat upon a throne, speaking to Yogimont, the monarch of transfiguration. So, the shadow monarch has turned against us. A faint smile formed on the silhouette's face. Very well. I will deal with him personally. He rose slightly from the throne. You need do nothing else. Prevent any further losses to our forces. The chapter ended with the sight of countless massive dragons in a vast swarm. The figure's voice echoed through the darkness. Prepare for battle. The chapter opened in the middle of the ongoing battle between Beru and Bellion. Bellion descended from above like a meteor, hammering Beru down and sending him hurtling toward the ground. It was a complete slugfest, neither side holding back. As the dust settled, Bellion pointed his sword straight at Beru. Beru struggled to stand, his body clearly at its limit, yet he still spoke, declaring to Jinwoo that he could continue fighting. Jinwoo finally intervened and asked Beru why he was so obsessed with becoming the Grand Marshal. Beru answered without hesitation. He said that he would become the Grand Marshal so that he would stand on his side. Jinwoo replied calmly that if that were the case, Bellion could stand as the Grand Marshal on his right, while Beru could stand on his left. At those words, Beru's eyes nearly broke into tears. Igris then stepped forward and announced that he, too, wished to challenge for the marshal position. Before he could even finish speaking, Jinwoo cut him off and told him that he could stand behind him instead. At that moment, Jinwoo noticed movement from the opposite side. Tusk appeared alongside the shadow dragons. Suddenly, the dragons unleashed an enormous torrent of flames straight into the sky, as if showing off their power. The pillar of fire pierced the heavens and illuminated the surroundings. Tusk smirked, pulled out the Orb of Avarice, and activated it. A far more powerful surge of fire magic erupted upward, forming something like a massive laser beam explosion. The entire area was flooded with light. When it ended, the Shadow Army erupted into cheers. Watching this, Jinwoo couldn't help but think that using the Orb of Avarice felt like cheating. Soon after, Jinwoo noticed several shadow soldiers carrying rocks and pieces of wood. Curious, he asked Bellion what they were doing. Bellion explained that they were building a small place to stay, so he could rest comfortably while they are here. Jinwoo wonders if this had been Beru's idea. Bellion then asked why he hadn't called his soldiers back into his shadow. Jinwoo explained that he wanted to let them take a breather. They had been trapped in the dimensional rift for a long time before coming here. Jinwoo then asked Bellion if he felt sad knowing that he would no longer be able to meet Ashbourne, the previous Shadow Monarch. Bellion answered that he had stood beside Ashbourne when he fought against the rulers who opposed the Absolute Being. Bellion had proclaimed himself Ashbourne's first soldier the moment Ashbourne obtained the power of death. He had remained by his side for almost an eternity and had never once doubted his decisions. Jinwoo said that he wanted to hear more about Ashbourne and asked Bellion to tell him their story. Bellion replied that it would be a very long tale. He began by explaining that he was once a fruit of the world tree. All soldiers of the heavens were born on its branches in the form of fruit. A fruit? Jinwoo asked in disbelief. You were a fruit? Bellion explained that the world tree was so enormous that its branches alone could cover the entire sky. Jinwoo could only respond with a confused, huh? Later, the scene shifted to Jinwoo's apartment. Jinwoo had cooked a meal for his family, and it was clear from their expressions that they loved the food. Despite this peaceful moment, Jinwoo couldn't stop thinking. He knew he had to inform the world about the existence of the 8 armies that could arrive at any moment. He had to warn them that war was approaching. He could not promise everyone's safety, nor could he promise that the world would remain as it was. Through Ashbourne's memories, Jinwoo had witnessed the overwhelming power of the Dragon King. And now, enemies of that magnitude were targeting Earth. Everyone needed to prepare for what was coming. His mother suddenly asked if something was going on. Jinwoo asked what she meant. She explained that whenever his father was about to do something dangerous, he would always cook a meal just like this. She then told Jinwoo that he truly took after his father. Jinwoo quickly replied that it wasn't like that. Just then, Jinwoo stood up and walked toward the door, saying they had a visitor and that he would answer it. Jinna looked confused and asked how he knew, since the doorbell hadn't rung. When Jinwoo opened the door, he found Mr. Yu, Jinho's father, standing outside. Mr. Yu apologized for visiting without notice and asked if he could have a moment of Jinwoo's time. Outside, the two spoke privately. Mr. Yu said that at first, he believed he had awakened from eternal slumber because he was special, but he soon realized that such miracles didn't happen so easily. Since then, he had noticed that the only people who had awakened from eternal slumber were himself and Jinwoo's mother. Because of that, he couldn't help but suspect Jinwoo's involvement. He then asked why Jinwoo had helped him. Jinwoo replied that he had decided to help because he thought he was trustworthy. He added that if he were the kind of person who would do anything to get what he wanted, he wouldn't have risked himself to save him. Mr. Yu asked if what he meant was that he hadn't tried to use Jinho. Jinwoo answered yes. Overwhelmed, Mr. Yu said he didn't know how to repay him. He asked if there was anything Jinwoo wanted. Jinwoo said there was nothing he wanted. However, if something were to happen to him, he asked him to take care of his mother and sister. Mr. Yu asked if that would truly be enough. Jinwoo said it would be more than enough. Mr. Yu nodded and promised to leave it to him. The scene then shifted to the Hunter Association office. On a large screen, Chairman Jinshul explained to Jinwoo the appearance of a colossal gate in Shanghai, China. And it wasn't limited to China. 8 colossal gates had appeared around the world almost simultaneously. He asked Jinwoo if they were part of his army, but Jinwoo replied that they were not. They were enemies. After that, Jinwoo asked Jinshul if he trusted him. Jinshul answered without hesitation that he did. Jinwoo then asked him to trust what he was about to show him. Before Jinshul could react, Jinwoo stepped closer and pressed his index finger against Jinshul's forehead, just as the previous Shadow Monarch had once done to him. Darkness engulfed Jinshul's vision, followed by a flood of images. Jinwoo showed him only what he needed to know: the ruler's plan, the monarchs, and their approaching armies. When the visions ended, Jinshul gasped for air. This is insane. How could this be? He confessed that he had always believed the gods granted special powers to a small number of humans so they could protect humanity from demonic beasts. If what he showed him was the truth, then his beliefs had been nothing but arrogance. In his mind, the hunters, no, the awakened, were merely those who survived after the true war, filtered so that only certain humans remained. This was not a war between humans and monarchs. It was a war between monarchs and rulers, two factions wielding unimaginable power. Jinchul asked if Jinwoo planned to fight such enemies alone. Jinwoo answered yes. Jinchul then asked how they could assist him. Later, leaders from various countries gathered. Jinchul asked an association agent if anyone else had said they would attend. The agent replied that representatives from 152 countries had already reported in that morning. The agent hesitated, then asked what Jinwoo had shown Jinchul the day before, since he had never seen him turn so pale. He immediately apologized for overstepping. Jinchul said it was fine. In his mind, he recalled the vision, an army of dragons emerging from darkness, led by a single, colossal dragon flying behind them. A presence so majestic that even if every hunter in the world united, they wouldn't be able to leave a scratch. The pressure of its power alone could burn the entire world to ash with a single breath. I felt it, he thought. Just how did Hunter Sung Jinwoo plan to fight that? Soon after, Jinchul contacted Jinwoo and told him that he had gathered representatives from every country as requested. He asked where Jinwoo was. Suddenly, Jinwoo appeared behind him and said that he had arrived. Jinchul joked that asking for his location had become meaningless now. He warned Jinwoo that chaos would erupt once the truth was revealed and that some countries wouldn't be able to handle it. Jinwoo replied that he was already aware. The chapter ended with Jinchul thinking, "Today, the truth will be revealed to the world." The chapter opened with Mr. Brennan observing the tense atmosphere inside the conference hall. Countless influential figures had gathered, presidents, prime ministers, guild masters, and even the chairman of various hunter associations. The pressure in the room was overwhelming. Everyone hoped that Hunter Sung Jinwoo would say the same thing he had said before, that the gates would not cause much damage. But what if he said the opposite? Jinwoo suddenly began to speak. He warned them that everyone would soon be forced to endure a harsh and brutal time. No one would be able to avoid the coming battle. The enemies would appear right before their eyes and bring destruction to everything. One representative immediately stood up, questioning whether Jinwoo truly expected them to believe such claims. He added sarcastically that Jinwoo shouldn't tell them that even national-level hunters would be powerless. Jinwoo calmly replied that at least several hundred demonic beasts on the same level as Kamish, the greatest disaster in human history, would appear. Not even national-level hunters would be able to stop them. The hall erupted into murmurs. Some representatives demanded proof, stating that they could not believe such claims without evidence. One representative asked if he really expected them to believe that hundreds of Kamish-level monsters could appear at once. Without another word, Jinwoo raised his left hand. Gasps filled the room as countless gates suddenly materialized behind him. Chaos erupted. People shouted in disbelief, unable to comprehend how such a thing was possible. Multiple gates appearing at once, seemingly created by Jinwoo himself. Jinwoo explained that their enemies could create gates anytime and anywhere, just as he had done. The only reason they had not attacked yet was that they were still preparing due to the massive size of their army. Suddenly, a representative shouted an accusation. "What if you're one of them? The soldiers you brought out of the previous gate. Did you bring them here to kill us?" Another representative then calmly asked what humanity was supposed to do now that they knew what awaited them. Jinwoo answered simply, "Stay away from the gates. Get as far away from them as you can." His warning sent shockwaves across the world. With the announcement that humanity could not withstand the number of demonic beasts that would emerge, people everywhere began evacuating as far from the gates as possible. The scene shifted to a remote island where a massive castle stood. Jinwoo was there, accompanied by his shadow army. He called out to Beru and ordered him to drop. Jinwoo frowned in disappointment, commenting that he had only asked for a place to stay. Aside from its massive size, was the castle even meant for him? Beru immediately dropped to the ground, pressing his head against the floor. He explained that he believed nothing less would be worthy for his king. Jinwoo then noticed a flag planted at the top of the castle. "Why is there a flag up there?" he demanded. At that moment, Bellion also lowered his head to the ground. That was when Jinwoo realized it had been Bellion's idea. Jinwoo then asked what happened to an army when its monarch died. If he were to die, would someone else take command of the Shadow Army? Bellion answered, his head still bowed, that their lives were bound to him. The moment he perished, they would perish as well. Jinwoo reflected that the Shadow Army's greatest strength was their absolute loyalty, placing their master's life above their own. Yet that loyalty was also their greatest weakness. Like two sides of the same coin, their enemies would surely exploit it. Bellion then spoke again, stating that they stood no chance in an all-out war. Jinwoo asked Bellion how large the enemy army to be. Bellion estimated that their forces would be at least 100 times larger. That meant at least 10 million soldiers. The scene shifted to Chairman Jinshul watching an interview featuring Canada's S-rank hunter, Jay Mills. Jay scoffed during the interview, saying that if he had Sung Jinwoo's contact information, he would tell him to drop the bullshit. The interviewer pointed out that Sung Jinwoo was considered the strongest hunter in the world and asked whether it wouldn't be wise to heed his warning. Jay replied that no matter how powerful Jinwoo was, it didn't mean everything he said was true. He added that Jinwoo wasn't scaring him in the slightest and that Canada would never allow him to monopolize all the gates. The interview ended. Chairman Jinshul explained that hunters had begun gathering in Canada under Jay Mills' leadership, with powerful hunters from other countries joining them. He then asked Jinwoo what he planned to do next. Jinwoo replied that he would head to China first. Facing 8 armies at once was impossible. He needed to eliminate the closest threat to Korea, the one that endangered his family the most, before dealing with the others. The longer the war dragged on, the higher his chances of victory. The scene shifted to China as Jinwoo landed at the airport. He commented that he had heard government officials would be there to greet him, but instead, Hunter Liu Jigang was waiting. Jigang laughed and explained that the officials were busy making ridiculous placards, so he decided to welcome Jinwoo himself. Jinwoo glanced upward and remarked that the gate was visible even from the airport. Jigang nodded, explaining that it was the colossal gate that had appeared recently. Smiling confidently, Jigang gestured toward the massive formation below the gate, China's 100,000-strong hunter army. He explained that they were not just numerous, but elite. It looks like it's about to begin, Jigang said. Jinwoo gave a single command. Come forth. In an instant, Jinwoo's shadow army emerged, commanders included. Jigang stood frozen in shock. In his mind, Jinwoo was on an entirely different level. He wondered where all of them had come from. Falling monsters from the sky? Here? Impossible. He asked if all of them were Jinwoo's summons. Beru suddenly stepped forward, declaring that the king's left side was his rightful place and demanding to know who dared stand there. Jinwoo struck Beru in the stomach and pointed at Jigang. He's on our side. Jigang stared in disbelief. You can communicate with them? Before Jinwoo could respond, everyone looked up. It's opening. The gates slowly began to open. The hunters' hearts pounded, their chests tight with tension. But nothing came out. Bellion spoke quietly, saying he felt no presence from the gate. Jinwoo froze. What? Bellion reported that all other gates were the same. Jinwoo realized his mistake. He had assumed the enemy divided their forces across the world, but instead, they had gathered everything in the gate farthest from him. The scene shifted to Canada, where a massive red gate loomed over the land. Hunters waited beneath it, led by Jay Mills. Jay scoffed, saying everyone was blindly relying on Sung Jinwoo. Canada would not run. Their hunters would protect the country, no matter what emerged from the gate. Protesters nearby held signs declaring that they would never abandon Canada. The gate cracked open. Jay smiled. It started, but nothing came out. Confusion spread among the hunters. Had Sung Jinwoo been bluffing? Then, a single figure emerged. At first glance, it looked human, but it wasn't. A towering warrior stepped forward, clad in jagged armor, crimson hair flowing amid a storm of red aura. His calm, merciless gaze radiated absolute authority. The figure landed before Jay Mills and asked, "Are you the king of this land?" Jay, confused. He noted that the creature was not a typical demonic beast. Another hunter explained that demonic beasts possessed intelligence, crafted their own equipment, used runic language, and lived in strict hierarchies, much like humans. They simply hadn't bothered communicating before. Jay smiled again. So humans and beasts can talk, huh? He believed he understood now. Sung Jinwoo must have been able to command monsters because he communicated with them. Jay lifted his chin and said, "And what if I am the king?" The figure glanced around dismissively. "Then you are not the one I am looking for." Back in China, Jinwoo felt a sharp sense of danger emanating from the farthest gate. He asked if there was any way to confirm what was happening in Canada. An agent asked him to wait. Suddenly, Jinwoo remembered Adam White from the Hunter Bureau and called him. Adam answered. Jinwoo asked about the situation at Canada's Colossal Gate. Then he heard cheering through the phone. Jinwoo demanded to know where Adam was. Adam replied that he was at the gate site with other agents. Jinwoo shouted, "Why the hell are you there?" Adam explained they couldn't just stand by and watch. Numerous agents had been dispatched. Jinwoo cursed inwardly. They still didn't understand the enemy's scale. He asked if anything had changed. Adam said no. The gate was empty and quiet. Jinwoo let out a sigh of relief. Then Adam froze. "Hold on, something's coming out." "A person," Adam whispered. Jinwoo's blood ran cold. "Run," Jinwoo shouted. "Get away from there, now." Adam stammered as he watched top-ranking hunters turn to ash in an instant. Dragons filled the sky. Endless numbers of dragons and beasts poured out, gathering in one place. Jinwoo realized the worst had come. At the very least, he could save Adam. Activating the shadow he had placed on him, Jinwoo controlled it to act. The shadow wrapped around Adam. "We're teleporting now." Adam's face twisted in terror as a towering figure appeared before them and spoke coldly. "Where do you think you're going, Shadow?" The chapter opens with a terrifying figure emerging from a gate, now standing directly before Adam and the shadow orc Jinwoo was controlling. The figure opened its mouth and generated a blazing sphere of energy. A fireball formed from pure destruction. It exhaled the attack toward Jinwoo's shadow soldier. The moment the flame struck, Jinwoo felt the impact despite being far away. His shadow soldier and Adam standing beside it were instantly burned away. The fiery breath was powerful enough to melt even an immortal shadow soldier in a single blow. Jinwoo cursed under his breath. "Damn it, I should have expected this." The enemy knew they were facing his shadow army, an army that only grew stronger the longer a battle dragged on. That was why they chose to minimize prolonged engagements. Instead of spreading their forces, they had concentrated everything in one place. They had opened 8 gates to make it seem like they were following their original strategy. But in reality, they had sent their entire army through the gate farthest away from him. This is a terrible mistake, Jinwoo thought. Even if he moved there immediately, it would turn into an all-out war. His plan to buy time had completely collapsed. At that moment, Hunter Liu Jigang shouted Jinwoo's name, worried. Nearby, an agent stared at his phone in disbelief as news from Canada flooded the screen. Jinwoo wondered grimly if there was truly nothing he could do. The scene shifted to Canada, where the being that had emerged from the gate was finally revealed. Antares, the monarch of destruction. The Dragon King. With a grim smile, the Dragon King gazed down at the human ashes beneath his feet, clearly satisfied. He then turned his attention to the soldiers of the world of chaos pouring endlessly from the gate. Having been trapped between dimensions for far too long, they reveled in their newfound freedom, wielding their powers effortlessly. The Dragon King closed his eyes, spread his arms wide, and savored the sensations, the heartbeats of living creatures, their screams, the sounds of despair. 2 more figures descended and landed before him. Tarnak, the monarch of the Iron Body, and Yogimut, the monarch of Transfiguration. They bowed in respect before the most powerful monarch. The Dragon King laughed, his voice shaking the ground itself. He roared to the soldiers still emerging from the gate. "We have but one mission. Destroy everything." Hundreds of dragons streaked through the sky, raining fire upon the land below. The scene shifted to David Brennan's office in the United States. Alone, he watched the live broadcast of Canada's destruction while drinking expensive liquor. He muttered that they must all be dead, the hunters, agents, and reporters who had been on site. Jinwoo's warnings echoed in his mind. Hundreds of dragons, oceans of giants, beasts, and insects following behind them. This disaster was something humanity could never contain. It's only a matter of time before they reach the US. Now he finally understood why Hunter Sung Jinwoo had advised everyone to stay as far away from the gates as possible. This world is finished, it's all over. Suddenly, A black shadow bloomed across the office floor. Jinwoo emerged from it. Brennan froze in shock. Jinwoo calmly explained that he had come for something: the rune stones. He asked Brennan to hand over the rune stones left behind by Kamish. Brennan slammed his hand on the desk, instinctively arguing that the Kamish rune stones were managed by the Hunters Bureau. Then he stopped. What am I even saying? Why does the Hunters Bureau matter anymore? If the entire US was about to be destroyed, the rune stones meant nothing. Rubbing his face, Brennan muttered that he must still be drunk and apologized. He then agreed to hand over the rune stones, but asked why Jinwoo needed them. Jinwoo answered simply, to launch a counterattack. As they headed toward the vault, Brennan asked if the rulers had truly sent the demonic beasts, and what the rune stones inside those beasts really were. When the basement doors opened and the rune stones came into view, Jinwoo explained. They were gifts from the rulers, created to help humans hunt demonic beasts more efficiently. What the rulers truly wanted were intense battles, conflicts that would allow mana to take root in the world. Human sacrifice was merely a side effect, not their ultimate goal. When a demonic beast died, its abilities were sealed within a rune stone. That was why the rulers created them. Brennan asked quietly if Jinwoo could really stop the Monarchs with these. Jinwoo replied that he had to try. Then he asked for one more favor. The scene shifted to a grand mansion. Ms. Norma Selner sat on a sofa, smiling faintly as she spoke. She had never expected someone to come looking for her at a time like this. She told Jinwoo that he was no longer the same person she once knew. Before, there had been darkness deep inside him, but now, he was darkness itself. Jinwoo replied calmly that he was still the same person. He had simply become one with the darkness she had seen back then. Then, with a serious expression, he asked if she could see the future, and if she would look into his. Startled, Ms. Selner closed her eyes and took his hand. Silence filled the room. Tears suddenly fell from her eyes. Are you really going to carry this burden all by yourself? Jinwoo only smiled gently and said nothing. Sobbing, she asked how a single human could bear so much, and whether he planned to protect everything by sacrificing himself. Jinwoo's expression brightened slightly. Thankfully, that means I can get there at least. Confused and worried, she asked what he meant. She told him no one would remember, that it would be a lonely fight. Jinwoo apologized for the sudden visit and request. Before she could finish calling his name, Jinwoo vanished into the shadow beneath his feet. Jinwoo appeared atop the tallest building downtown and sharpened his senses, searching for an energy signature. Suddenly, he took out his phone and made a call. It's me, he said with a smile. On the other end, Cha Hae-in could hardly believe it. Jinwoo, is it really you? He apologized for being so busy lately. She said it was fine. She had been busy too, smiling softly. They talked about how long it had been since they last saw each other. We'll meet again soon, Jinwoo said. Yes, she replied quickly. Then she asked if he could promise to come see her. Jinwoo smiled. I promise. They ended the call, a gentle smile lingering on Hae-in's face. Moments later, Choi Jong-in asked if it was time to move. Flustered, Hae-in quickly agreed. Hunters from across the globe assembled. Guild Masters Lim Tae-gyu, Ma Dong-wook, and Baek Yoon-ho stood alongside elite hunters. Lu Jigang led China's forces. Japanese hunters had also arrived, including Blade Guild Master Reiji Sugimoto and his members, Tawada and Kumamoto. Germany's national hunter Leonard Nierman joined with his top hunters. Thomas Andre led the U.S. forces. Alliances were formed: the Asian Hunter Alliance, the European Hunter Alliance, the African Temporary Guild Union, and the Chinese Emergency Response Alliance. Hundreds of thousands of hunters marched toward battle. Hae-in led her group into a massive military transport. The scene returned to the Dragon King, standing atop countless corpses. I am right here, he declared. His reptilian eyes sharpened as he sensed someone scanning him. Power, only one being possessed. The Dragon King stopped and glared in Jinwoo's direction. They found each other at the same time. A roar like hundreds of thousands of lightning bolts shattered the sky. Tens of millions of your kind are already dead, the Dragon King said. How long will you continue to hide? The chapter ended as Jinwoo's eyes burned with rage. He then said, I'll go meet you soon. The chapter opens with the Dragon King standing atop the ruins of a shattered building. From his elevated position, he gazes down at the battlefield, deep in thought. His mind lingers on the one he calls a bastard, the Shadow Monarch, Jinwoo. Why was Jinwoo being so quiet? What was he planning? The Dragon King calculates the situation. There are 10 million soldiers combined with widespread chaos. Facing such overwhelming numbers with only 100,000 troops would be nothing short of suicide. If survival had been the goal, they could have fled to the bottom of the abyss instead. Suddenly, a rocket strikes the Dragon King directly in the face. He doesn't even blink. Moments later, countless rockets rain down on him, detonating in a massive explosion. The barrage comes from fighter jets flying overhead. Inside one of the jets, a pilot speaks over the radio. "I hit the target," he says, though he admits he cannot visually confirm whether the target is down. Still, he believes it worked this time. Then, a thunderous explosion erupts. Flames burst forth, and through the fire, a pair of enormous dragon eyes open. The pilot freezes in terror, unable to speak. What happens next is completely unexpected. A massive dragon silhouette slowly emerges from the smoke, surrounded by fighter jets circling in the air. On board, the Dragon King says calmly. Energy begins charging inside his open mouth. In the next instant, a devastating blast erupts, instantly annihilating every fighter jet in the vicinity. The scene shifts to a dark castle where Jinwoo and his army are gathered. Jinwoo sits upon a shadowy throne, his eyes still burning with rage. As he looks up, he notices words written above the throne by Beru. "My king." Jinwoo smiles faintly and murmurs his thanks. Suddenly, Beru rises from the ground before him, visibly emotional and on the verge of tears. "My liege," Beru says. "I know," Jinwoo replies. At Jinwoo's right side, Bellion kneels and speaks gravely. "It's too dangerous, my liege." Igris appears on Jinwoo's left and echoes the concern. "I feel the same way, my liege." Jinwoo acknowledges their worries. He knows they fear for his safety, but there are moments when one must move forward, even knowing the risks. Ashbourne, the former Shadow Monarch, once said he liked this part of me, Jinwoo said. Turning to Bellion, Jinwoo asked, "If he were in my position, what would he do?" Bellion suddenly falls silent, and Jinwoo said, "Then I will not stop doing what I have to do." As Bellion, he looks into Jinwoo's face and notices the faint smile on his lips. His eyes widen as he sees the image of Ashbourne reflected in Jinwoo's expression. They truly resemble each other, Bellion thinks. He smiles and says, "As expected." After that, Bellion, Beru, and Igris kneel together before Jinwoo. "I shall accompany you until the end, my liege," Bellion declares. "Thanks," Jinwoo replies as he rises from the throne. He begins walking forward, his three shadows following closely behind. Jinwoo glances at his cell phone, which Bellion notices. "Shouldn't you contact your family?" Bellion asks. "No," Jinwoo answers. Images of his mother and Gina flash through his mind. If he were to hear their voices now, he knows he wouldn't be able to move forward. With that, Jinwoo crushes the cell phone in his hand. "Let's go," he says. The scene shifts to the eastern side, where the devastation caused by the Dragon King and his army is laid bare. A dragon chases a fighter jet through the sky, eventually biting into it and causing it to explode. The pilot manages to eject in time and parachutes safely to the ground. He hides, trying not to be noticed. When he looks around, he witnesses countless demon beasts slaughtering civilians and hunters alike. Suddenly, he turns around, and his eyes widen in horror. A massive demon insect stands right behind him. The insect lunges at him, but the pilot narrowly dodges and is sent flying by the impact. He spots a gun nearby, grabs it, and fires relentlessly at the creature. "Die, you bastard," he shouts. The gunfire continues until, click, he's out of bullets. The insect is still alive. "Shit," the man mutters, closing his eyes in despair as the creature approaches to devour him. But the attack never comes. Slowly, he opens his eyes and sees the demon insect split cleanly in half, lifeless. He looks past the corpse and gasps. "Jesus." Jinwoo. Hunter Jinwoo. Jinwoo stands calmly before him. "Go," Jinwoo says. Still unable to process what he's seen, the man responds weakly, "Yes." A massive horde of demon beasts suddenly charges toward Jinwoo, and the man screams in panic. Jinwoo remains calm. A powerful aura erupts from his body as he waits for the enemies to approach. When they are close enough, He raises his dagger and issues a command. Commander's authority. His eyes blaze with rage. With a single slash, the charging beasts freeze, then are instantly cut apart, falling one after another. Jinwoo turns his back and walks away. This is the first step in the war, he declares. The chapter ends with Jinwoo speaking once more. Let's start from here. He raises his power and commands. Arise. The fallen beasts begin to rise again, now as his soldiers. The chapter opens with the Dragon King standing alongside two fellow monarchs. He informs them that the Shadow Monarch has appeared on the Eastern Front. Yogimont responds immediately, asking whether they should rally their entire forces and launch a full assault. Tarnak adds that he cannot sense his shadow army within his own shadow and notes that the Shadow Monarch appears to be acting alone, without his army. The Dragon King does not answer. Instead, his thoughts turn inward. Is he planning to defeat all the troops here by himself and add them to his army? It certainly seems that way. The Shadow Monarch appears to be avoiding a direct confrontation, deliberately buying time. The Dragon King cannot shake the feeling that something far more dangerous is being planned. The scene shifts to Chairman Jinchul's office. He is watching the events unfold live. News reports confirm that all contact has been lost with the hunters sent to stop the monsters. The U.S. military has mobilized, evacuating civilians while desperately buying time. In Jinchul's mind, tragedy is unfolding across the entire world. The mighty United States, which had concentrated the majority of its forces in Canada for this battle, is collapsing under the overwhelming onslaught of the monsters. At this point, all they can do is hope for a miracle. Yet Jinchul wonders what kind of miracle could possibly stop such beings. Under his breath, he whispers, "A miracle. Please, do not forsake us." Meanwhile, tens of thousands of new shadow warriors are added to Jinwoo's shadow army. Like a massive tsunami, the shadows consume everything in their path, steadily overwhelming the battlefield. Jinwoo continues his relentless slaughter of the army of destruction. The head of an insect-type beast is severed in a single instant. One after another, beasts are cut down as Jinwoo moves like a whirling storm, every enemy that approaches him having their body cleaved apart. He suddenly stops spinning. A giant beast stands before him, raising its weapon to strike. The beast swings, triggering multiple explosions upon impact. Jinwoo narrowly avoids the attack and bursts through the smoke, dashing straight toward the giant. A sharp slash rings out, so fast it almost seems harmless. Then Jinwoo passes by. A moment later, the giant's leg is cleanly severed. Unable to move, the giant collapses. Shadow dragons emerge instantly, lunging at its face. One clamps its jaws down, crushing and devouring it as Jinwoo stands calmly before the fallen monster, twin daggers in hand. He looks upward. Countless dragon beasts fill the sky. Jinwoo realizes that the army of ruin has begun to move. Yet he cannot sense the Dragon King, so he has no intention of moving yet, Jinwoo thinks. Still, there is no need for disappointment. There is plenty of time left. If he's hesitant to act, Jinwoo muses, then I'll simply give him a reason. The dragon beasts descend in a massive assault. Arise. At Jinwoo's command, the fallen giant rises as a shadow soldier and charges at the dragons. Several of them scatter to avoid its reach. One dragon gathers energy in its mouth and fires a blazing fireball. The attack pierces straight through the giant shadow's body, destroying it instantly. The dragon roars arrogantly. How dare these man-made puppets attempt to block the Dragon Monarch? It declares itself a servant of the Dragon King and vows to eliminate the Shadow Monarch. Before it can react, Jinwoo is suddenly above it, riding Kaisel. Seriously, Jinwoo says calmly, "You talk too much." The dragon's eyes widen in shock. In the next instant, Jinwoo flashes past it, and its head is severed cleanly. From afar, the Dragon King senses it clearly. The Shadow Monarch is growing stronger by the minute. He finally gives the order for the other monarchs to move. To Yogimont, the Monarch of Transfiguration, he commands him to remain behind and prepare a surprise attack on the Shadow Army. Understood, Yogimont replies. Dozens of gates open before the Dragon King as he says, "Don't miss out." The scene shifts again, this time to a battlefield where soldiers desperately fire their weapons at the advancing beasts. One soldier shouts for everyone to use all their remaining ammunition. Even hitting the beast's limbs might slow them down. They just need to hold out until the hunters arrive. Suddenly, a beast lunges forward and bites off a soldier's head in a single motion. Another beast charges the remaining troops, only to be met by an overwhelming punch to the face. The force of the blow sends the beast flying back into its allies. The punch belongs to Thomas Andre, who smiles confidently. "I've fought these bastards before," he says. "They had an army back then, but it wasn't that strong." A powerful yellow aura flares around his body. The soldiers erupt into cheers. It's the Scavenger Guild. Thomas Andre has arrived. However, Thomas's expression suddenly turns serious as he looks ahead. A man approaches, accompanied by monstrous beasts. "You're the human I saw back then," the man says. The ruler's weak underling who dared oppose the beast monarch right before his death. He introduces himself as the king of monstrous humanoids, the Iron Body Monarch. His eyes glow green as he boasts that he could behead Thomas before he even blinks. "So," the monarch asks, "are you still willing to stand in my way?" Thomas shrugs. "I don't know," he replies. "I hate challenges anyway." Behind Thomas, shadows begin to emerge, countless shadows. Bellion appears at his side and greets the monarch coldly. "Long time no see, king of monstrous humanoids." The monarch's eyes widen in shock. The Shadow Army? Were they hiding inside this human shadow the entire time? Realizing he has been ambushed, he tries to contact Antares, but fails. Looking upward, he sees Tusk, who is blocking his telepathy using the Orb of Avarice. Tusk locks eyes with him and smirks while continuing his incantation. The monarch burns with rage. This isn't the Shadow Monarch's way, he thinks. This is the way of humans, cornering their enemies and sentencing them to death. His body begins to crack as his fury explodes. He has no right to be a monarch. At that moment, Beru steps forward, enraged. "What you just said," Beru growls, "take it back. The price for slandering my liege is heavy." A violent mix of dark red and dark purple aura erupts from Beru. "How dare a mere soldier block a monarch?" the Iron Body Monarch roars. Beru answers with a piercing screech. The Iron Body Monarch activates his spiritual body manifestation, transforming into a terrifying creature covered in glowing yellow-green cracks, green energy, and crackling lightning surrounding him. Beru stands fearlessly before him, his own aura blazing just as fiercely. The scene shifts once more. Ruins, destroyed buildings. A heavy tension hangs in the air. Jinwoo, the Shadow Monarch, stands silently, looking up at the top of a ruined structure. There stands Antares, the Monarch of Destruction, the Dragon King. The chapter ends as the two monarchs move toward each other, the inevitable confrontation drawing near. The chapter opens with Jinwoo and Antares facing each other at close range. Antares stood atop a building, his gaze dark with suspicion. He wondered whether the monarch of Iron Body had betrayed him, or if his inability to make contact was simply the result of the Shadow Monarch's sorcery. Suddenly, Antares opened his massive jaws, fire energy rapidly condensing within. In the next instant, he unleashed the attack directly at Jinwoo, declaring in his mind that he must kill him no matter what. A colossal fireball erupted from his mouth, and although Jinwoo had anticipated the attack, the overwhelming force still shocked him. The fireball scorched everything in its path. Buildings and ground alike were reduced to ashes, transforming the area into a raging sea of flames. As the smoke slowly dissipated, Antares remained standing, faint wisps of smoke trailing from his mouth. He then looked up and saw Jinwoo hovering above on his wyvern. Jinwoo calmly issued a command, "Arise." Countless shadow dragons burst forth and surged toward Antares. The Dragon King did not move. Instead, he simply raised one hand. The scene shifted to Hunter Liu Jigang, who was locked in battle with a colossal beast giant. His eyes glowed yellow as he unleashed multiple slashes, shredding the giant into pieces. Landing atop a building, he muttered that creatures like giants were not much of a problem, as long as they were not fought at sea. Looking into the distance, Liu frowned. The magical energy blanketing the world was trembling violently. Tens of thousands of hunters were likely battling endless waves of magic beasts everywhere. Even from this far away, his entire body prickled from the sheer density of magic power. Then he sensed it, two terrifying auras clashing. One dark purple, the other dark red. Have they finally started over there too? He muttered, referring to Jinwoo and the Dragon King. The battle returned to Jinwoo and Antares. Antares raised his hand once more and unleashed an overwhelming torrent of flames toward Jinwoo's shadow army. Shadow soldiers struck by the fire vanished like dust. Antares scoffed, mocking Jinwoo for relying on such good-for-nothing soldiers, accusing him of challenging the monarch with nothing but these troops. Suddenly, Antares noticed Jinwoo dashing toward a gate. Is he trying to escape? Antares immediately dashed forward, vowing not to let him go under any circumstances. He leaped through the gate in pursuit and emerged into a shocking sight. Jinwoo's entire shadow army surrounded him. Antares noticed unfamiliar shadow soldiers among them and realized the truth. Jinwoo had already absorbed the troops of the Monarch of Iron Body. His gaze shifted to the Iron Body Monarch himself, whose body was disintegrating, defeated by Jinwoo's shadows. Beru stood above him, while Bellion kept watch. Antares narrowed his eyes. Jinwoo had first eliminated the Iron Body Monarch's forces before luring him here. Not a bad strategy, he admitted. Suddenly, Antares sneered. You're being absurd, Shadow Monarch. Atop a distant building stood Yogyamonte, the Monarch of Transfiguration. Behind him, countless gates opened. These are the gates Yogyamonte prepared, Antares declared. With them, I can summon as many troops as I desire. He laughed coldly. I've completely crushed your plans. Your misjudgment will be the cause of your death. It's your loss. From the gates, a massive dragon army began to emerge. Jinwoo merely smiled. Cancel summon. At his command, his shadow soldiers returned to him. Antares frowned in disbelief. Why would you cancel your summons? Don't tell me you've already given up. Confidently, he continued, saying that after witnessing the overwhelming difference between them, Jinwoo's surrender was only natural. Jinwoo stood silently as Antares' dragon army surrounded them. He slowly looked upward, gazing at the countless dragons circling above. Then he closed his eyes. Antares watched carefully. Suddenly, Jinwoo's aura changed. His face hardened, and his eyes transformed, resembling those of a dragon. Antares froze. Something was very wrong. His eyes widened in shock. That can't be, you bastard. A terrifying aura burst forth from Jinwoo, originating from Kamish's rune stone. Stored within it was a skill feared by all dragons, their worst enemy. A roar erupted from the depths of Jinwoo's soul. Dragon's fear. The mighty roar overwhelmed everything weaker than him, plunging all who heard it, ally and enemy alike, into crippling despair. Dragons fell motionless from the sky. Even Yogyamonte was completely immobilized. Antares clenched his teeth. He could understand dragons being paralyzed, but even Yogyamonte? Impossible. In the next instant, Jinwoo appeared beside Antares and grabbed the Dragon King's arm with an iron grip. Follow me. Antares' mind raced. Was everything leading to this moment? Wrapped in Jinwoo's shadows and unable to resist, Antares was transported away to a land prepared for the coming war. What is this place? Antares demanded. A location on the opposite side of the world, Jinwoo replied calmly. Far from your army. Antares laughed. An all-out war would favor me if you had that many troops, but it would drain your magic power faster. Bringing me here alone, that's an impressive strategy. His gaze shifted to the massive castle behind Jinwoo. Is that your castle? Jinwoo nodded, a hint of shyness in his expression. Yes, it is. Antares scoffed. For something belonging to the Shadow Monarch, it's not very impressive. Jinwoo summoned a dagger crackling with dark energy. Even so, he said coldly, I thought this castle would be the perfect place to commemorate your death. Antares smiled. So this battle comes down to whether I can last until my troops find me. His body began to transform, scales spreading as his form expanded into that of a massive dragon. Jinwoo stared at him without emotion. The chapter ends with Jinwoo and his shadow army standing ready before Antares, the Dragon King now in his true dragon form. The chapter opens in the United States, inside the Federal Bureau of Hunters headquarters. Mr. Brennan and Ms. Selner stood by the window, watching the chaos unfolding outside. The flames of war have spread across the entire U.S. territory, Ms. Selner said quietly. Mr. Brennan nodded grimly. All kinds of mana are running wild. It's spreading throughout the region. He ran a hand through his hair, his expression strained. "I never thought Hunter Sung was telling the truth," he muttered. "What are we supposed to do now?" Miss Selner turned to him. "Hunter Sung isn't the only one we have. Hunters from all over the world have thrown themselves into this battle. E ranks, S ranks, everyone." She continued calmly. "An E rank hunter is only slightly stronger than a normal human. Surely they know that. Other than carrying magical weapons, they can't contribute much to the battlefield. The same is true for D ranks and C ranks." She explained further. "If an E rank hunter can barely handle one magic beast, a D rank might manage 3, and a C rank perhaps 10. Even S rank hunters were no exception. Even if an S rank can kill thousands," she said softly, "they will eventually fall, just like countless stars fading away." Ms. Selner gazed out the window. "But when those individual stars fall and trace faint shapes across the sky, they show us the future. People call that hope." The scene shifted to South Korea, inside the Hunters Association headquarters. An agent reported urgently to Chairman Jinwoo that Hunter Sung Jinwoo had successfully lured the enemy to a nearby uninhabited island in Japan. Jinwoo's eyes widened slightly. He recalled Jinwoo once telling him about a massive island, tens of kilometers wide, where a giant gate had collapsed long ago, leaving behind an enormous concentration of mana. If the battle took place there, the damage to civilization could be minimized. So that's why he hid that place all this time. The agent hesitated. "Should we dispatch a few hunters there, just in case?" Jinwoo shook his head. "Aren't all the S-rank hunters currently in the US?" Then he asked quietly, "What kind of hunters would we even send?" After a moment, he smiled faintly. "We could send E-rank hunters." The agent blinked in confusion. "Did you know," Jinwoo continued, "that Hunter Sung himself used to be an E-rank?" "Pardon?" the agent stammered. "I know it's possible," Jinwoo said calmly. "Even an E-rank hunter can become a hero." The scene returned to the battlefield. Antares had fully assumed his dragon form. Jinwoo hovered above him, riding his Kaisel. As Antares began charging a massive fireball in his mouth, Bellion suddenly moved. Bellion swung his sword like a whip, wrapping it around Antares' jaws. With a powerful pull, he forced the Dragon King's mouth shut. Antares' eyes widened in shock. As Bellion slammed the whip into the ground, giant shadow soldiers seized Antares' neck, restraining his movements. At the same time, Tusk activated gravity acceleration, crushing Antares' massive body into the ground. Then Beru and Greed leapt forward together, unleashing simultaneous strikes directly into Antares' face. A deafening explosion followed. Immediately after, Igris appeared above Antares' head and drove his blade downward, releasing a crackling, electrifying aura that surged through the Dragon King's body. From above, Jinwoo observed calmly. "This is working surprisingly well," he thought. Despite being pinned down, Antares suddenly laughed. How amusing. His eyes flared open as a terrifying aura erupted from his body. "I prefer battles where I overwhelm my enemies with overwhelming numbers," Antares declared. "But I find the opposite situation quite entertaining as well." Jinwoo's instincts screamed. A chill ran down his spine as goosebumps covered his skin. The Dragon King released a deafening roar, his own version of dragon's fear. A violent shockwave swept across the battlefield, shaking the ground and warping the space itself. The shadow soldiers were overwhelmed by terror, pain, and confusion. Jinwoo immediately reacted. "Cancel summon." Before Jinwoo could fully recover, Antares began charging another devastating breath attack. The energy gathered rapidly, aimed straight at Jinwoo. "Come back," Jinwoo commanded. Kaisel obeyed instantly, pulling Jinwoo out of the line of fire, just as Antares unleashed his breath. The blast erased everything in its path, triggering massive explosions and reducing the terrain to nothingness. From within the rising smoke, Antares' silhouette emerged. "This," he said, "is the real thing." He continued coldly. "The avatar of destruction who does not hesitate to sacrifice himself for the sake of raging war. An amalgamation of blood, screams, madness, and annihilation. A being born solely for war. That is me. Antares, the king of dragons, the monarch of destruction." Jinwoo remained still struggling to recover. He realized something terrifying. Even the enormous mana that had seeped into the ground after the giant king's death had been utterly meaningless against that attack. Even undying shadow soldiers would be annihilated instantly by a direct hit from Antares' breath. Antares then returned to his human form. "You don't need to be so tense," he said calmly. "When you grabbed my arm earlier, I could have broken free easily. I chose not to." He smiled faintly. "You impressed me by driving me into a corner. As fellow monarchs, I wanted to have a quiet conversation. If you inherited the previous Shadow Monarch's memories," Antares continued, "then you already know this. The true enemy does not reside in this world, but beyond the skies. The army of the rulers exists for only one purpose: to destroy the monarchs born from darkness. And you, Shadow Monarch, are no exception." He admitted that he had originally planned to eliminate Jinwoo before preparing for that war, but after witnessing his battle, he had changed his mind. "You possess talents entirely different from Ashbourne's," Antares said. "I've seen the glorious victory that awaits you." He made an offer. "If you wish for your family to live, for your country to be preserved, and for your soldiers to depart peacefully, I will grant it. You will become the owner of this land." He clarified, "I don't mean the castle. I mean this entire planet." Antares extended his hand. "You have the qualifications. Join me. If we combine our forces and defeat the rulers, your family, your country, and this world will regain peace and freedom." "How about it?" he asked. "Shadow Monarch, will you join me?" Jinwoo stared at the outstretched hand. Then he smiled faintly. "Don't make me laugh," he said. "How do you expect me to believe you when your eyes are screaming that you want to kill me?" Antares' expression hardened. Then suddenly, he burst into laughter. Even his laughter carried immense mana. Jinwoo had to brace himself as dark energy crackled around Antares' body. When the Dragon King finally straightened, his eyes were cold, reptilian. "I suppose I can't hide it anymore," Antares said quietly. "This was my final mercy. Prepare yourself, Shadow Monarch." The chapter began with Antares suddenly initiating an attack. In an instant, his body started transforming back into his true dragon form. His arm elongated grotesquely, reshaping itself into a massive limb meant purely for destruction, and he swung it toward Jinwoo. Before Jinwoo could even blink, Antares' claw was already above him. Jinwoo leaped back to evade the strike and immediately summoned Kaisel, while simultaneously generating his Kamish daggers. Antares completed his transformation, his entire body returning to its full dragon form. Without hesitation, he unleashed his breath of destruction, spewing an overwhelming torrent of flames toward Jinwoo. Jinwoo barely managed to evade the blast and shouted for Kaisel to dive downward. Using the momentum, he leaped forward, gripping both daggers tightly in his hands. Jinwoo swung his blades with incredible speed, the motion forming a pinwheel of black aura, an attack powerful enough to shred anything to pieces. Then, the attack struck the Dragon King squarely on the head. However, Jinwoo stared in disbelief as the attack failed to leave even a single scratch on Antares' reinforced scales. Antares turned his gaze toward Jinwoo and calmly declared that he could not be harmed by something like that. Realizing the danger, Jinwoo ordered Kaisel, "Let's get out of here." Before they could retreat, Antares activated Dragon Fear once more. Kaisel's body stiffened midair, completely immobilized. Jinwoo lost his balance, but Kaisel wrapped its tail around him and hurled him away from danger. Jinwoo managed to land safely, just as Antares followed up with another breath of destruction, which Jinwoo narrowly avoided. Antares scanned the battlefield, searching for Jinwoo. He refused to believe that the Shadow Monarch could be killed so easily. Taking advantage of the moment, Jinwoo activated Commander's authority. Using the force from the ground, he dashed straight toward Antares and landed on one of the Dragon King's massive scales. Smoke rose from Jinwoo's boots, as the surface of Antares' body felt like molten magma. Jinwoo struck again with his daggers, trying to pierce the dragon's scales. No matter how hard he swung, he could only manage to scratch the surface. Suddenly, Jinwoo felt the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. Antares' arm was already behind him. Jinwoo reacted instantly, leaping away just in time. Antares' arm slammed into his own body instead. Without hesitation, Jinwoo shouted a single command: "Arise!" Antares froze in shock as 3 shadow dragons emerged. One clamped its jaws around his neck, while the other 2 positioned themselves at his sides. charging their fire breath. They released their flames simultaneously, engulfing Antares. Watching the scene unfold, Jinwoo wondered if the flames used by Bellion and the ancient dragons were even effective against Antares. He realized then that the Dragon King possessed power and defense far beyond anyone Jinwoo had faced before. His usual methods would not work. To defeat an armored mountain, Jinwoo needed overwhelming strength, power capable of crushing it with bare hands. Suddenly, a dark purple aura began to leak from Jinwoo's body. An idea struck him. If he could create armor using the power of darkness, shouldn't he also be able to manipulate its shape? A shadow spread outward from beneath Jinwoo's feet. At the same time, Antares destroyed the 3 shadow dragons and scoffed, mocking Jinwoo for attempting to defeat him with such lowly shadows. Then, Antares' eyes widened. A massive surge of darkness was flowing toward the Shadow Monarch. "What are you scheming now?" Antares demanded. Black essence oozed from the shadows, wrapping around Jinwoo's body in countless layers. His form rapidly expanded, growing larger and larger like a raging whirlwind. Jinwoo focused his thoughts. He would create armor from darkness. Bigger, stronger, so vast that the entire world would be forced to witness it. Antares stared in disbelief as a gigantic shadowy figure rose before him, towering so high it nearly touched the sky. Tens of thousands of black lightning bolts struck its shoulders, as though the world itself was rejecting its existence. Is this astralization? Antares wondered. No, it was impossible. The Shadow Monarch was originally a fragment of light. Such beings should have no other form beyond their original one. And yet, this presence was overwhelmingly enormous. It can't be, Antares thought. Has he summoned the power of death onto Earth? How could a man who was once merely human wield the power of death to such an extent? Standing before Antares in his new form, Jinwoo made the Dragon King's colossal body appear small by comparison. Jinwoo looked down at his own hand. This is me. This was the true strength of Ashbourne, the Shadow Monarch, had left behind. The form was created from within his body, and an unimaginable amount of power flowed endlessly through him. Antares finally spoke. I see. You are someone who has lived between the realm of the living and the dead for a long time. That was why Ashbourne could pass such power to a mere human. Antares realized that Jinwoo had been fighting a battle against himself long before receiving this power, fighting for the sake of living. He must be killed, Antares declared. He's too dangerous. Antares charged Breath of Destruction once more and unleashed it toward Jinwoo. Jinwoo did not move. He did not evade. Instead, he raised his hand and released an overwhelming surge of power. The breath split apart. Antares recoiled in shock as the attack pierced through and struck him directly. For the first time, the Dragon King felt searing pain. The chapter ended with the 2 monarchs facing each other. They dashed forward simultaneously, their powers colliding in a catastrophic clash that produced a massive explosion. The resulting shockwave shook the ground itself. The chapter begins as the clash between the 2 monarchs finally erupts. The moment their collision ends, Antares immediately releases a ferocious claw attack toward Jinwoo. Jinwoo catches it with his left hand, while his other hand delivers an overwhelmingly powerful counterattack straight into Antares' face. The impact detonates in a violent explosion. Jinwoo follows up with another punch, but before it can land, Antares suddenly opens his jaws and bites into Jinwoo's body. Antares lifts him high and hurls him across the battlefield. Jinwoo crashes into the ground. The force is so great that his body nearly buries itself in the earth. Jinwoo struggles to stand, but before he can recover, Antares fires Breath of Destruction once again. Jinwoo barely manages to evade, retreating at the last second, yet the attack still grazes his right arm. Even so, Jinwoo did not stop. He generates a shadow sword in his left hand and dashes straight toward Antares. Antares answers with another Breath of Destruction, but Jinwoo meets it head-on with his blade. The 2 attacks collide, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. Jinwoo fails to notice Antares' tail whipping toward him. The powerful strike lashes across his body, sending him flying once more. Antares then ascends into the sky and forms multiple breaths of destruction above him. Below, Jinwoo struggles just to stand as Antares aims downward and rains the attacks like meteors. The explosions tear into the ground, nearly destroying it. Antares is suddenly caught off guard when a sword shoots upward from the ground, thrown by Jinwoo. It strikes Antares' left wing, shattering it. Below, Jinwoo generates multiple shadow swords and launches them into the sky. Antares responds with another breath of destruction, and the two monarchs' attacks collide in midair. The sheer power of the clash engulfed everything in smoke. When it cleared, Jinwoo's armored form had begun to dissolve under Antares' attack, forcing him back into his human body. He lands on the ground and collapses to his knees. At the same time, Antares' silhouette is revealed, his wing destroyed, and his body heavily damaged by Jinwoo's assault. Barely able to stand, Jinwoo exhales deeply, realizing that maintaining such immense power consumes an enormous amount of stamina. Suddenly, Antares also reverts to his human form. He looks at Jinwoo and speaks. "This is my final offer," Antares says. "Do you truly have no intention of joining me?" Dark shadows begin to envelop Jinwoo's body. His form shifts into something between human and the true monarch of shadow, a more balanced existence. Purple lightning coils around him, his eyes glowing intensely as crackling energy spreads across his body. Gripping his dagger, Jinwoo replies, "I have no intention of cooperating with a monster." "How foolish," Antares scoffs. His form transforms once again into a humanoid dragon, like a demon king forged from fire and darkness. Molten flames swirl around his armored body as a sword materializes in his hand, radiating intense heat and ruthless power. The two glare at each other fiercely before dashing forward. Antares' sword collides with Jinwoo's daggers, and the battlefield echoes with the sound of countless weapon clashes. As they fight, Antares speaks. "The Monarch of Transfiguration and the Army of Destruction are already destroying everything. In the end, you won't be able to protect anything, not even this moment where our blades cross." He continues mercilessly. "Even as the king of the dead, you are still human, and humans must fear death. Do you wish for flames that incinerate even death itself to reduce everything to ashes?" A menacing grin spreads across Antares' face. "Soon, everything you're trying to protect will prove to be nothing more than an illusion. You must sense it, ever since you awakened Ashbourne's power." Suddenly, Jinwoo's dagger is knocked high into the air. Antares drives his sword into Jinwoo's abdomen. "These are the countless cries of suffering in this world," Antares declares. "This is what war is." Jinwoo staggers backward as Antares continues. "This is the sound of the army of destruction ravaging humanity. Listen to their screams. Let despair spread. Regret your decision." Unable to stand any longer, Jinwoo braces himself by planting his remaining dagger into the ground. Antares' sword rests against Jinwoo's neck. "I should be the one saying that," Jinwoo replies calmly. At that moment, the dagger hovering above Antares launches forward under Monarch's authority, aiming for his back. However, a powerful energy barrier forms, stopping the blade completely. Antares grins. "Did you really believe a dagger made from a dragon's tooth could harm the Dragon King? Don't you find this amusing? A flame born within darkness versus a darkness born within light." Jinwoo dashes away as Antares continues speaking. However, it seems this battle is nearing its end. "That's right," Jinwoo answers. "I can see the end." "Oh," Antares mocks. "Have you finally decided that resistance is futile?" As Jinwoo charges forward, Antares raises his sword. "The army of destruction doesn't even need to find this place," Antares declares. "I'll raise their morale by beheading you." "Foolish monarch." Just as Antares prepares to strike, Jinwoo speaks. The sun darkens the shadows. Antares freezes. In an instant, countless shadow soldiers emerge and bind his entire body. Antares roars in rage. "You scoundrel! I'll rip you apart and turn you into drake fodder. I'll give you a miserable death for resisting the King of Dragons until your final moment." Gathering every ounce of strength he has left, Jinwoo unleashes a final, overwhelming slash with his dagger. As he strikes, memories flood his mind. His past, his father, Ashbourne, and the weak version of himself from the beginning of his journey. The blade cuts Antares from head to bottom. "I wonder," Jinwoo says quietly, "can you see your own death?" The chapter ends with the revelation that the dagger Jinwoo used was his father's dagger. Above them, The dark red sky begins to crack, and beyond it shines a brilliant, blinding light. Before we wrap up this arc, if you enjoyed the video, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Thank you. The chapter begins as Antares could not believe what had just happened. I didn't expect this, he muttered. It shouldn't be possible. He stared up at the sky as it shattered apart, cracks spreading across the heavens. Through those fractures, countless rulers emerged one after another. Antares was certain of one thing. When he had first arrived, there had been no gate. Connecting two worlds required an enormous amount of energy, far beyond what should have been possible under these circumstances. Then how is the ruler's army here? Antares demanded. His gaze snapped back to Jinwoo. Was this your plan all along, he asked. To distort space through the clash of great powers and bring your allies from the other world? Is that why you distracted the armies? Why you brought me here? Antares scoffed. I thought you simply wanted an undisturbed battle. There's no way you could have communicated with the rulers. Jinwoo answered calmly. There was a way. The vessels of the rulers, Jinwoo continued. The ones who were lent their powers, they were still here. Antares slowly lifted his head again, staring at the overwhelming army of rulers filling the sky. Is that so? He murmured. You found a way to win the war, even if you were to lose this battle. I was too focused on this single fight. He clenched his teeth. A complete loss, because I only looked at what was right in front of me. Jinwoo's eyes hardened. It was you, wasn't it? He said. The Monarch of White Flames and the Beast Monarch. You were the one who ordered them to attack the Shadow Monarch. Antares narrowed his eyes. Did the Monarch of White Flames tell you that? No, Jinwoo replied. Ashbourne did. A memory surfaced, Ashbourne's vision, where the Monarch of White Flames spoke in the language of beasts. Jinwoo looked straight at Antares. Ashbourne wanted me to send his regards. Then, without hesitation, Jinwoo raised his middle finger. Enraged, Antares roared and attempted to charge forward, but his body refused to move as spears pierced through him from every direction. The army of the rulers had struck, their weapons impaling Antares' body. Antares slowly lifted his head. Above him stood the greatest fragment of brilliant light. So this world was covered by both light and dark shadows, Antares whispered. I never had a chance from the very beginning. His face began to disintegrate. With his remaining strength, he looked at Jinwoo one last time. I will wait for you in true eternal rest, Antares said. Not the illusory eternal rest you created. We will meet again there. Jinwoo met his gaze. Don't worry, he replied calmly. I'll see you again soon enough. And with that, Antares vanished completely. The greatest fragment of brilliant light descended to the ground. He looked at Jinwoo and spoke. Thank you. You have ended the war. However, I do not know how to properly show my appreciation. Jinwoo shook his head slightly. I don't know if this can be called appreciation, he said. But I have a request. The fragment stiffened in surprise. I will do everything within my power to aid you, the fragment replied. Jinwoo did not hesitate. Use the cup of reincarnation. Just once more. Silence fell. You wish to turn back time? The fragment asked carefully. Yes, Jinwoo confirmed. The fragment explained. Even if time is reversed using the god's artifact, the consciousness of higher beings will remain. Are you prepared for that? The deceased monarchs will return, with all their memories intact. That's fine, Jinwoo replied. But once time is reversed, do not send them to Earth. I will take care of the monarchs and their armies myself, in the dimensional gap. The fragment stared at him. You are willing to shoulder the entire war alone, he asked. Why? We have used the cup many times. This is already the best outcome we have ever achieved. Jinwoo answered quietly. I've lost too many people. I want to bring them back. The fragment then spoke. The durability of the cup of reincarnation is nearly exhausted. If it fails this time, time can never be reversed again. If you stop now, you will be remembered as a hero who saved the world. But if you proceed, no one will remember this battle. If you lose, we will be waiting. And even if you win, there will be no one left to congratulate you. He paused. Do you still wish to turn back time? Jinwoo remained silent. Then a small smile formed on his lips. Images surfaced in his mind. His mother, Gina, Cha Hayan, Chairman Wu Jinshul, Jinho, the people he loved. Jinwoo stood up. I will go back in time. The fragment was silent for a moment. So you intend to save not just a part of the world, but the entire world with your own hands, he said. You will carry everything alone. Then the fragment remarks, You reminds me of Ashbourne, your predecessor. I understand, the fragment continued. I wish you the best of luck. Wait, Jinwoo suddenly said. What will happen to the shadow soldiers that didn't exist in the past? The beings that overlap with the past will perish, the fragment answered. Those that do not will remain. Jinwoo smiled. Got it. I'm ready. The greatest fragment of brilliant light raised the cup of reincarnation. May your courage save your world. A blinding light erupted from the cup. It spread outward, illuminating not only the place where they stood, but the entire world. And with that, the final battle arc came to an end. With the monarchs destroyed and humanity saved from extinction, the story now moved into the epilogue. Sung Jinwoo chose to travel back in time, determined to rewrite history and save the people he had lost.